This video is very personal to me because this is not exactly a horror story, but my own experience growing up. I spent most of my childhood in Muscat, Oman, through the 1990s and early 2000s, as my dad was posted there for work. And honestly, even now as an adult, I still think about this sometimes. I would not say this is the reason I started Obsidian Murmurs, but it definitely played a part in sparking my curiosity and interest in the unknown. At the time, I was 12 years old when my family shifted into what would become the second apartment we lived in there. And I remember I was already unhappy about the move before anything strange even started happening. Before this move, we had been living in a proper community area. I had friends nearby, kids to play with after school, just a much livelier environment overall. But then my dad's office shifted us into a different apartment building that was much more isolated. And from the beginning, something about that place just never felt right to me. Muscat was very different back then. There were no skyscrapers because the city had strict rules to preserve the natural beauty of the landscape and mountains. A lot of areas were still quiet and spread apart. The building we moved into was not some massive apartment complex. It was just a small building with 6 flats in total, 2 on each floor, including the ground floor. All the apartments were occupied by my dad's office colleagues and their families. In one apartment, there was a man who lived alone most of the time, though sometimes his brother would stay with him. The building itself stood in a strangely isolated area. Behind it was a mountain. In front was a main road. Beside it was a language institute that never seemed to have many people around. The nearest buildings were a few hundred meters away. The first thing I felt after moving there was the loneliness. And something else too. Something that felt, for lack of a better word, heavy. I cannot explain it properly, but there was always this constant feeling inside the apartment that something was off there. Around the same time, my mom also became seriously ill because of complications from an ovarian cyst. Back then, I did not really understand how serious it was because I was still a kid. I just knew she kept getting hospitalized for long periods and my dad was constantly stressed. My younger brother was still a baby then, maybe around 1.5 years old. So there were many days when it was just him and me alone in the apartment for long periods while my dad stayed at the hospital with my mom. It eventually got serious enough that she needed a major operation. It was only years later, when I was older, that my parents told me how serious the situation actually was. Some of my dad's friends had even donated blood for the surgery. That was around the time strange things in the apartment slowly started becoming noticeable. We would hear noises from different parts of the house. Sometimes it sounded like utensils had fallen in the kitchen, and we would run there expecting to see something on the floor, but there would be nothing. Other times, it sounded like something had dropped in the bathroom. Again, we would open the bathroom door and find nothing out of its place. These things did not happen every day, and not always at night either. But they happened enough that all of us noticed them over time. I also remember constantly feeling like somebody was watching me, and always having this feeling that there was someone behind me, even when I was alone in my room or watching TV. I remember looking over my shoulder multiple times, thinking it was my mom or little brother, but the room would be empty. Many evenings, after my mom had come back from the hospital and was slowly recovering, my parents would go out for groceries or errands while I stayed home. I never really liked going out much, so I usually preferred staying back reading or doing homework. And it was during those evenings that the feeling of being watched always seemed strongest. I would look around the room or walk through the apartment, thinking maybe my parents were back without me noticing. But the apartment would still be completely empty. Whenever I told my parents about it, my dad would calmly say that maybe I was just feeling lonely because my mom had been in the hospital for so long. Around this period, my parents also began noticing that I had started sleepwalking. I personally do not remember it, but they later told me that many nights I would suddenly walk into their room half asleep and ask the same question every time. "Did you call me?" My parents would tell me no and send me back to bed. None of us really connected these things together back then. We simply accepted them as strange little incidents and carried on with life. There was another incident from that apartment that I still remember very clearly. The man who lived alone in one of the flats eventually adopted a small puppy for company. Me and my younger brother became attached to it almost immediately because there were not many children nearby, and honestly, there was very little for us to do in that area. But from the day the puppy entered that apartment, it barked constantly whenever it was inside the house, day and night. One evening, after a bit of heavy drinking, the man became irritated and left the puppy outside the apartment door. According to him, the barking stopped completely the moment the dog was outside the apartment. But the next morning, the puppy was gone. I remember we all tried looking for it, but nobody ever found it. We stayed in that apartment building for around 2 years, but honestly, because of everything surrounding that period, it felt much longer to me. I still remember the day my dad came home and told us we were finally shifting out of that place. The new apartment was very close to my school, and I had many friends living nearby. I cannot properly describe the relief I felt hearing that. After living in such an isolated environment for so long, just the thought of going back to a normal community again made me genuinely happy. After we moved out, life slowly returned to normal. My mom recovered after her operation. I was back closer to school and friends again, and over time, that apartment became something we spoke about less and less. Then, a few years later, my parents invited that same man from the apartment building over for dinner one evening. I was around 15 by then. I remember my mom calling me into the room and asking me to sit with them because there were some things she wanted me to hear for myself. That conversation completely changed the way I remembered that apartment. The man openly said that he believed the entire building was haunted. Not just one apartment, but all of them. According to him, over time, every family in that building had privately experienced strange incidents, but nobody wanted to openly discuss it while they were still living there. My parents later admitted that many of the families had gradually started pushing to move out because of the atmosphere in that place. And once people left, nobody ever really moved back in again. The man also spoke about experiences in his own apartment that were far more intense than anything we had personally experienced. He described hearing doors opening and slamming late at night, and many times he would fall asleep on the sofa in his living room, only to wake up later feeling a cold breeze coming into the apartment. His living room was connected to a balcony through a large, heavy glass sliding door, and according to him, it was not the kind of door that could casually slide open on its own because of the wind. But many times, he would wake up and find the sliding door was open, even though he clearly remembered locking it before falling asleep. He told us that when his brother stayed with him for a few days, he also began hearing the same noises around the apartment, especially at night. According to him, one night his brother suddenly woke up, feeling like somebody was trying to shake his hand. When he opened his eyes, he saw what looked like a man standing beside him in the dark, while his own hand was stretched outward, as though he had actually been reaching towards someone. His brother apparently started screaming as the figure disappeared back into the darkness of the apartment. The man also said they would regularly hear what sounded like a ball bouncing around in the apartment above them, even when that apartment was completely empty. During the conversation, he also brought up the puppy again. I remember him saying that he regretted putting it outside that night and always blamed himself for what happened to it. But the part of the conversation I can never forget was when my mom finally explained why she had wanted me to sit there and listen to all of this. She said she needed to know she was not going crazy. According to my mom, during the years we lived in that apartment, she repeatedly saw a young woman inside the house. Not every day, and sometimes with long gaps in between sightings, but enough that she never forgot her. The first time it happened was while I was at school. My dad was at work, and my younger brother was asleep. My mom was about to enter the bathroom to take a shower when she suddenly saw what looked like a young woman lying motionless inside the bathtub in a pool of blood. She said the shock of seeing it almost made her faint. Somehow, she managed to call my dad, who rushed home and contacted the police. The police searched the apartment and found absolutely nothing. But according to my mom, that was not the last time she saw the woman. She described her as being somewhere in her late 20s, always dressed in black, quiet, and strangely calm. My mom said she would see her on multiple occasions throughout the house. Sometimes, she would simply be standing somewhere in the apartment, looking toward me and my younger brother, sometimes even at night while we were asleep. My mom said that she sometimes wondered whether my sleepwalking and constantly asking if someone had called my name was somehow connected to the woman she kept seeing. A few times, my mom also saw her again inside the bathtub, exactly the same way as before. On those occasions, she would wait outside the bathroom for some time before going back in, and eventually, the figure would no longer be there. What disturbed my mom most was that the woman never reacted to her presence. She never spoke, never moved toward her, and never seemed to acknowledge that she was even being seen. During that same dinner conversation, another thing came up that I had never fully thought about before. Apparently, every family in that building who had a woman or young girl living there had experienced some kind of serious health issue during those years, just like my mom's ovarian cyst, which actually suddenly flared up during our stay there. I honestly cannot remember all the details anymore, but I remember my parents discussing how multiple women across the apartments had fallen seriously ill while staying there. The man had his own theories about the place. He spoke about how Muscat was rapidly modernizing during those years, with new roads and buildings appearing everywhere, but that many of these areas had once been empty land for generations before development started. He said nobody really knew what some of those plots had originally been before construction. He also mentioned how Oman has always had old folklore surrounding jinn and unexplained places, especially in older towns and isolated areas. Places like Bahla were already well known for stories involving spirits and abandoned places long before the internet existed. I do not remember exactly how long that conversation went on for after that. Eventually, dinner ended, the evening moved on, as did everything else. But I never forgot that apartment. And today, after all these years, I sometimes think about that place and wonder what exactly all of us experienced there.